Yo tengo la posibilidad de revelar la existencia extraterrestre. Hay una forma, mostrando pruebas. Hay experiencia de militares que han luchado contra extraterrestres en la base de luz. Algunos han muerto en la lucha, boinas verdes, boinas negras. Increíble, pero de esto guarda silencio el gobierno norteamericano. Secreto de Estado, no lo permite. Por eso dense en cuenta que todo el tema extraterrestre entre los gobiernos es silencio, alto secreto, materia reservada. Y en los medios de comunicación lo mismo. No tienen inconveniente en invitar a alguien que diga que ha visto un ovni o una luz o algo. Pero en las investigaciones arqueológicas hay una serie de leyes estrictas para que ciertos emplazamientos donde haya experiencias y objetos extraterrestres nunca se hagan públicos en los medios de comunicación. Yo llevo años intentando llegar a los medios de comunicación para mostrar la existencia de extraterrestres, porque ellos no se dejarán fotografiar o filmar, así de fácil. Incluso el gobierno norteamericano tiene terror solo de decir su existencia, y eso que llevan años y décadas trabajando con ellos. Tienen terror y miedo, porque ellos han prometido que si revelan su existencia, destruyen Norteamérica.
My name, as I said, was Paul Hellyer. I'm a former Minister of National Defence for Canada. I served in 3 governments during a total of 23.5 years as a Member of Parliament. Although as Minister of National Defence, I had sighting reports of UFOs. I was too busy to be concerned about them at the time because I was trying to unify the Army, Navy and Air Force into a single Canadian Defence Force. And that itself was a kind of battle to the finish. So this was not high on my agenda. But about 10 years ago, I started getting interested. A young man from Ottawa sending me material on the subject. I told him I was too busy to read it, but he had confidence that someday I would. He sent me a copy of Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. It took me a while to get around to reading it, but I took it for my summer reading in 2005 and was really impressed with what is contained in it. And what I thought to myself is there are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. And so after confirming the contents of the book with a retired United States Air Force general, I accepted the invitation of Victor Vigiani, who's over here somewhere, and his cohort Mike Bird to speak to a symposium at the University of Toronto. And I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally. There are only a few things that I want to add in that particular realm. First is that about in the 1960s sometime, there was a flotilla of UFOs headed south that crossed into NATO territory in Europe, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Supreme Allied headquarters in Europe was naturally very shaken. Fortunately, maybe divine providence, before the panic button was pushed, the flotilla turned around and headed back north. And obviously they thought maybe they were Russian and they were very concerned about it. Anyway, an investigation was launched into this whole subject, and a document was prepared which concluded that at least 4 species had been visiting Earth for thousands of years. This is my own view. chairman were interested in some of the places they might come from. And I have in here Zeta Reticuli, the Pleiades, Orion, Andromeda, and the Altair star systems. So I don't think we can any more refer to them as they, because they're not an amorphous mass. They are different species and consequently may have different agendas. I don't think we can say that they all have the same agenda any more than we could say that the United States, China, and Russia had the same agenda. Our real interests may be very similar, but as of now, our perceived interests are still quite far apart. One more observation before I begin what I want to say, and that is that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the 66-year-old cadavers. And I was glad to have Linda this morning finally say that there are live ETs on Earth at this present time, and at least 2 of them probably working with the United States government. The other species that I learned about not too long ago was called the tall whites. And this is when Paula Harris broke the story just a few years ago. And through her good offices, I had the chance to talk for about 3 hours with former Airman Charles Hall and listen to this absolutely fascinating story of how he was working with, first of all, he was scared out of his skin, but after that, when he got to know them, how he was working with, and finally they became to trust each other and have a good working relationship with the tall whites at the gunnery range at Indian Springs, Nevada. And these tall whites were living on the United States Air Force property and working in cooperation with the United States Air Force and sharing technology with it. He wrote a book, incidentally, called Millennial Hospitality.
My question is actually to Clifford Stone. You said that you had seen aliens on a craft that had crashed. I wondered if you could describe what they look like.
I could, but it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference, except for some of the things that they might be able to go ahead, even in a dark room, and touch an object and go ahead and identify what color that object might be. They would have a heightened sense of smell, sight, hearing. The situation is that you have various types of what we normally call grays. We didn't call them grays in the military, but you had at least 3 types of the grays. You had some that were much taller than we were. The unique thing that I'd like to point out for the most part is that the entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid. Now this created a situation where the scientific community was trying to figure out why that would be the case, because you would expect that if life evolved on other planets, that they would take on some type of other being, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are.
Eran también hijos de Dios. Tercera cosa en que coinciden religiones y ovnis, en que hay algunos que son positivos, y esto no tenemos que olvidarlo nunca, y otros que son negativos. Los negativos trabajan mucho más, los positivos son mucho más discretos. qué? No intervienen, son más respetuosos, ¿verdad? El que tiene la suerte, por ejemplo, los contactados a los cuales se los llegan y a los abducidos, hay algunos que les ha ido muy bien, perfecto, y les han ayudado, porque han tenido la suerte. Pero la mayoría les ha ido muy mal. Yo aquí una vez le preguntó un periodista, cuando usted se considera un ufólogo, un ovnílogo. Yo no me considero un ufólogo, sino demonólogo. ¿Por qué? Porque la ufología es otro nombre de la demonología. Yo no creo que todos los ovnis vengan de otros planetas, sino que se trata de lo que el cristianismo es. Ángeles caídos y demonios que llevan con nosotros desde el origen de los tiempos. De inteligencias hostiles que nos desprecian. Tratan de controlarnos y de influenciar nuestras ideas y nuestras creencias. Entonces se entabló una gran batalla en el cielo. Esto es Biblia. En la que Miguel y sus ángeles combatieron contra la serpiente. También la serpiente y sus ángeles combatieron, pero no vencieron. Y no hubo ya en el cielo lugar para ellos. Fue entonces arrojada la gran serpiente, la serpiente antigua, el llamado diablo y Satanás, el seductor del mundo entero, el que está detrás de toda esta gente. Fue arrojada la serpiente y sus ángeles a la tierra, y fueron arrojados con ella los sirvientes. Ay de la tierra y del mar, porque el diablo ha bajado donde vosotros con gran furor, sabiendo que le queda poco tiempo. ¿Qué dice el Vaticano de todo esto? Pues mire, el Vaticano de esto no dice nada. Hasta hace poco había Monseñor Corrado Balducci, que era un buen hombre, que se murió hace muy poco y era como de relaciones públicas de la iglesia, y pues decía que no, que sí, él admitía el fenómeno ovni, que eran también hijos de Dios, que eran seres que no iban a nada, era un ingenuo.
They're not all friendly, all right? What were your dealings with the unfriendly type, and why?
Yeah, I never had to deal with any of the unfriendlies. I was just warned that not all contact will be friendly.
And we didn't realize back in the beginning that they were made up of not only malevolent guys out there, and there are some of them out there that don't like us at all. They're not purposely malevolent, they're not hostile, but they don't like the human race, and they don't give a damn whether we survive or not. Thank God we have good friends out there.
It's the threat. In other words, first of all, you know they've done abductions. We know that they allowed them to do abductions, and yes, some of the abductions are positive contactee experiences, etc., etc.
And some of them are painful.
And depends who it is, but they also had an agenda, and one of those agendas is to create a hybrid race.
They're harvesting us. We made an agreement with them, 1954. We would allow them to continue to harvest